Welcome to the latest edition of the Buff Zone podcast. Pleased to be joined by Matt McChesney from 60 Strength and Fitness. New location, correct, Matt?
Yes, sir. 10470 South Progress Way in Parker. We'll be officially moved in February, but we're moving in right now. It's a process. That's a process. But we're rolling, man. We're on the field tomorrow, and we're back in the gym Thursday, and putting foot to ass and making dreams reality.
Awesome. Well, I like coming down and visiting your place a couple times a year, so I need to get down to the new facility here soon.
Let's do it, man. We got a lot of talent.
Yeah, and I know you obviously, for people that don't know, Matt's been training some of the top guys in the state for a number of years now. I mean, you look at the top rankings of recruits every single year, and out of the top 10, what do you say, Matt? 4 or 5 are going to be out of that gym?
I'd say average. If you look at like Blair Angelo does such a great job with 247 and their rankings, and if you look at last year's top 25. Just using last year as a barometer, we had 17 of the top 25 total players in the state in the gym at one point.
Okay. Yeah.
So that'll give you some indication. We had 21 guys sign this year early. We had 5 guys leave early, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, 2 to Boise State, so on and so forth. So we're changing lives down there, man. It's a pretty fun gig, and especially in Hobbytown. I mean, you know how I feel about Colorado high school football, and it doesn't make me the most popular person, but to be honest with you, that's not really what I'm looking for.
Well, and there's a reason why I come down to your gym. It's because you got all the top guys there. It's not the only reason. I mean, I like talking to you and all that stuff. But
thanks.
You got the top recruits there and everything. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But obviously you played for the Buffs, you played in the NFL, you bleed black and gold, so we want to talk about the Buffs season that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. I also want to talk about some of the changes that have happened. I think there's more coming. We'll see, but a couple of staff changes have been pretty big and surprising so far. So we're going to talk about that. So first off, what are your thoughts on this Buff season that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago? A very ugly loss against Texas. Only 49 scholarship players available for that game, and they lose 55-23, I think it was, in the Alamo Bowl. What were your thoughts on that?
The thoughts on the game were, you never want to lose to Texas. You never want to lose 55-23 to Texas. I only beat Texas once when I was in college. They waxed us when I was a freshman, and they waxed us when I was a sophomore, and we got them in the Big 12 title game. And then they beat us 31-7 in Folsom when I was a senior. So they've always been tough on us. The beginning of the Big 12 experiment with Texas, we were whipping that ass, and they definitely rebounded the last 10 times we played them. I think we've only beat them once. So you never want to lose to a team that I don't like. I'm not going to lie. If you're going to sit here and talk about Big 12 rivals, I have no love for Texas, horns down. Other than, the corn that I'm just bred to hate and internally just will never, ever like. They're real high on my list. So you never want to lose that game, but being in it was awesome. This team was projected to win 1.5 games by Vegas this year, and they went 4-2, and they had the potential to play for the Pac-12 title. And honestly, I thought they should have, and they should have gone over Oregon to play SC, just because the Pac-12 should have looked at that a little bit differently this year, but they didn't. Larry Scott's got to lay in the bed he makes, man. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the hot seat here coming up, because Pac-12 is. It's another conversation for another day, but whoa. As a whole, I was extremely positive about the season. I loved what I saw. After talking to Coach Durrell on my podcast 2 weeks ago, I was really excited that there's so many guys coming back. Mustafa and Lang and Wells and Landman and so on and so forth. Pretty much the entire defense. You're losing Will Sherman. He's going to the league, and obviously he's taking the advice of people that he trusts. And if he's leaving early, he's a draft pick. I doubt the guy would leave early if he wasn't being projected to be drafted. I've worked with Will a lot, and he's a great NFL prospect. He's got long arms and good feet. So they're going to have to replace him, but they've got the guys to do it. Especially with all the kids coming back with an extra year of eligibility. So I was really thinking productively. And then I talked to Coach Durrell, and he brought me back down to earth with, we finished 0-2 and we gave up a lot of points and we didn't play very well. And every job's open for competition. And I went from a high to a low back to a high because the minute he told me that everything's open for competition, the competitor inside me sparked, and I'm like, that's how we get good again. So overall, Brian, I couldn't be more pleased. Look, brother, I keep saying this on every radio show I go on. I say it on my podcast. I've said it to you before. I was a senior the last time we won a bowl game. Okay. That was 2004. We beat UTEP in the Houston Bowl. Woohoo. But still, at that time, I was pissed off. We were 8-5 and we played in the Big 12 title game. I thought we failed, honestly. I thought we had a failure every year. We didn't play very well in the big games, even though we beat CSU, Kansas State, and Nebraska in the same year. We still lost Oklahoma and Texas, and we didn't play well against the South. And I would take 8-5 consistently now, pretty much. I think I'd give my pinky right now every year to go 8-5. So this long, losing streak that they've been on, regardless of the bowl games they've been to since, they're not winning them. That's got to end, and it's got to be number one priority next year. Win the Pac-12, play for a Pac-12 title, win a bowl game, and get another trophy in there that doesn't say 2004 on it. I'm 40 years old, man. That's got to stop.
Yeah, and I will say, listening to your podcast with Darrell, that's the first time I've heard from him. The only time I've heard from him since the bowl game, and listening to him after the bowl game, but then also on your podcast, it made me say to myself, okay, he's realistic in what this program is. That I felt like, hey, this was a good step this season. You lay the foundation. 4-0 was a good start. But in reality, this was not a great football team. I think that this team –
total overachieve.
I think this team overachieved a little bit, but I think they benefited from the schedule.
Yep.
I know projections are projections, Matt, and coaches will say that. But you look at the preseason projections, and the top teams of the Pac-12 are supposed to be Oregon, Washington, USC, Utah, ASU, right?
Yep. I think the Buffs were picked, 9th or 10th?
Right.
4 wins.
So of those 5 teams, the Buffs played one of them, and they lost.
Yep.
So they didn't have to play the top, and all 5 of those teams were on their schedule. They ended up not having to play those teams. So they also had A&M on the original schedule, which probably would have taken to them what Texas did to them.
Probably.
It
would have been a slaughter. But I agree with you. But I'll let you finish. I'll shut up.
Well, I'll just say this. I think that when you're 4-0, I think there can be some false sense of what this team is. I think that they overachieved a little bit. That was a nice foundation. But what I've heard from Darrell right after the bowl game and then on your podcast is that he knows there's a lot of work to be done here, and that 4-0 was nice, but that they are nowhere near where they need to be, and I don't think they're anywhere near where they need to be.
And I agree with him and you wholeheartedly. I'm very encouraged by the foundation laid, but then I'm looking at next year, and I'll bring up the schedule again. They open in Folsom against UNC, and I would bet that Rick George will try and maneuver that game after COVID. I bet he tries to get CSU or Wyoming, or maybe it is UNC. I don't know, but knowing Rick George, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the phone. And then they have A&M at home. They have Minnesota at home. And then their home schedule in the Pac-12, they host Washington. They host Oregon. They host SC. They host Arizona. They're on the road in Tempe, which is a hard place to win. They have to go to Salt Lake at the end of the year. Their schedule next year is ruthless. Now, I know all about this. I played for Barnett's Buffaloes, bro. And we played North Texas when I was a senior, and it was like, we're playing North Texas.
Right.
Like last year we played CSU, Washington State, Florida State, somebody else, and then we went into conference. Like you're playing a dog. I think my junior year we played CSU, UCLA, Washington State, Florida State, and then went into conference.
Yeah.
And it was like, and by the end of all those 4 games, I remember looking around the locker room and guys were just like destroyed.
Right.
And, and that team in 2003 was talented enough to win 10 games. We ended up winning 5 because of just the rigors of the season and the lessons learned. And I take it back to that because the Buffs need to learn from this season and not let the sugar rot their teeth.
Yeah.
All right. Landman got hurt. It happened for a reason. I truly believe things like that have it for a reason, to come back and win the buckets and show everybody that you're a 200 tackle machine. Carson Wells can come back next year and lead the country in sacks and TFLs. Lang can turn into an absolute 12-year four technique in the NFL, be a first, second, third round draft pick. Mustafa, even though he's undersized, he's so explosive. I think that he can turn himself just, I'm not saying slim up because he's so thick. He's like a tree stump.
Yeah.
I'm saying he uses his length so well on one arm. He gets slim in the cylinder when he's rushing the passer, and it makes him just a matchup nightmare. And then you look behind them, I really think this defense has the potential to be great. Now, potential is a scary word. That Tyson Summers got canned. I like Tyson. I thought he did a good job with what he was kind of saddled with. I'm kind of surprised that he's out this late. Unless they're, and I said this on my podcast today, make sure you check out McChesney Unchained at DMVR. But I wouldn't be surprised if Coach Wilson is in there interviewing for the defensive coordinator job right now. He was the DC at Mississippi State back in the day. They were really good underneath him. He did a really good job with that. Bring somebody in to coach the D-line, or let him keep coaching the D-line. And he also is the defensive coordinator, and maybe that keeps him in the room, because you and I both know that there's a lot of rumors circling around Coach Wilson and where he may and may not go. And then Drew Wilson, moving on from him. And I think that this team has so much potential to be great, but they've got to learn more from their mistakes than their victories. This team, Brian, over the last 3 seasons prior to COVID finished 5-7. And they were in two or three, all 3 of those years, they were either undefeated or 4-1 at one point. Right. One year they were 5-0 and they went to SC and lost ranked and plummeted and didn't win another game. So CU is extremely streaky, and they've had the talent to break this curse. They don't have the mindset to break it. And it's all about mindset in Boulder, bro. So they have got to get tough as nails. This has got to be, and I know the old school way of football is over. I get it. You hit somebody, take you out of the game. I would not survive in this kind of football. I'd be ejected every single damn game. And pretty much everything on my highlight tape is now illegal. Every single thing I did. So
a lot of guys that are older, right?
Well, yeah, all of us. Yeah. We're all savages back in the day. It's how many fingers are you holding? Your head hurt? Who gives a shit? Get back in the game. Right. So I'm looking at it like this. Back in the day, we weren't great, but we were pretty good. We played in a lot of Big 12 titles, and we won a lot of games. We also lost a lot of games we should have won that we didn't play very well. We had to learn how to be consistent in order to achieve our goals. It's not so much going out and dominating everybody and just hitting them in the mouth. Sometimes you got to win ugly, but consistency gets you there. And this offseason, they've got to, like Coach Wilson and Coach Hagan and Coach Shiv, who's been there in the past, and Coach Durrell, who was back in the day with Neuheisel and Mad Dog and Doc Crease and all those cats. It's got to go a little like Fieldhouse, 5 a.m., throwing up on each other shit show. Because that's how we used to get down, bro. I remember the last day when I was a senior, on last day of Dirty Dozens, we used to have 12 5 a.m. workouts. And our last day, we ran 74 40s. 74. And if you fall out, don't come back. You either run and finish or you don't come back. And honestly, in 04, going into my senior season, I'm the only starter on defense that's a senior. Everybody else is a baby underneath me. And I trusted those guys like I went in with them, because it was winter conditioning and spring ball was so ruthless after we finished 5-7 my junior year. That's what needs to happen again this year. And with the NFL talent they have in the room, they can't do anything but get better. This offseason needs to be the most uncomfortable offseason in the history of Colorado football. And if they do it right, greatness will spring out of it, and they will be on a fucking roll. I truly believe it.
Yeah.
Sorry to
It'll be interesting, though, because, there's rules and laws that don't allow you to be as ruthless as you guys were, right? For one. But then number two is – right. What's going to be interesting, though, Matt, is – and we don't know this – is what's this offseason going to look like because of COVID, right?
Exactly.
We don't even know if they're going to get a spring ball, things like that. So that'll be interesting. But I will say one thing I like about this program right now that I thought Mike McIntyre struggled with early in his tenure. He did not recruit well in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. And finally, by the end, his last one or two classes, he started getting some pretty good offensive and defensive linemen. These are the guys that we saw play this year. So I want to, I think we need to give Buff fans may have a problem with this. I think we need to give Mike McIntyre some credit for what he started doing at the end, because he recruited Will Sherman and Colby Purcell and Kari Kutch and Roddick, Mustafa Johnson, Terrence Lang, Jalen Sami. All these guys that are playing right now were recruited by Mike McIntyre. They started finally doing that at the end. So I think that the Buffs are getting better there. For me, the next step for the Buffs, they need an elite quarterback. You've got to have that. I mean, you got the trenches, but you need an elite quarterback, right? What's that?
They got one, bro. They got one.
With Brendan Lewis?
His name's Brendan Lewis, yeah.
Well, we'll see. And, obviously
I saw enough. And look, Neuer did a great job, but Lewis should be the starter moving forward if he earns it. Don't give him shit. Make him earn it.
Right.
But he should have the edge just because he can move.
Yeah.
He's better at being fluid with his feet, and that is such a weapon in college football that Colorado hasn't had that advantage since Cordell.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing that you look back. I mean, Steven Montez almost got into the game the other night, right? I mean, he was about that close from getting into that game.
Yeah.
There has not been a CU graduate quarterback play in the NFL since Coy Denver.
Holy shit. Now you're making me feel real bad.
And Coy was drafted in 97. Coy was the last CU quarterback drafted. He was also the last one to appear in a game. So it's been a long time since CU's had good quarterbacking, right? I thought Montez played well. I liked what Stefan Lufau brought to the table, but these were not NFL elite guys, right? And the Buffs have got to get elite quarterback, and whether it's Brendan Lewis, JT Shrout, the new transfer, whoever it is, they've got to get good. They got to get good quarterbacking play. That's going to take them to the next level. But Matt, let's transition to a couple of moves that you alluded to.
Yes, sir.
Drew Wilson, Tyson Summers, both out. Both moves surprised me. On the one hand, a new coach, which Darrell still is, wants to get his guys in there. On the other hand, I thought those were two guys that had done a really good job with this program, and I was surprised that those were the first two names that we hear are out. What about you?
I was shocked that Wilson was relieved or not re-upped or whatever happened. He's not coming back. That was shocking. I thought Drew did an unbelievably good job up there turning that program from soft and kind of spongy to hard. Yeah. Those kids were ready to play. They were in shape, great attitudes, weight room's always humming. Watching them work out on social media, the little things you see, but also I know so many of those kids and work with all of them. And so many of them come down to the gym in the off season, and they did nothing but just speak so highly of Drew and his staff. So, Drew, thank you from a Buff to a Buff. Thank you for everything you did, and I wish you nothing but the best in your adventures down the road. And I was shocked about that, and I text Coach Darrell, like, who you thinking about for strength and conditioning? He's got a guy on his mind, so I'm sure that he's looking at one of these NFL cats that he knows to come in and kind of mature this team a little bit more. Maybe that's what he's thinking. With Tyson Summers, I'm not so surprised that he's moving on. That's what coaches do most of the time. I was kind of surprised by the timing. I think it could have happened a little sooner, so you'd have a little bit more of a pick of who you want, unless you already know the guy, kind of like Rick George with Carl. He knew that the minute Mel walked out the door, I know in the back of Rick's mind, he was like, Carl Darrell, bam. And that's the guy he wanted. So maybe that's what's going on here. Like I said earlier, I think that Coach Wilson is much deserving of that opportunity to go and interview for the job at least and get a real hard look at that because, look, man, I like Coach Summers, but Coach Wilson is 50 times the coach that Tyson Summers is. No offense to Coach Summers. I played for Coach Wilson, and if you want to be motivated to run through a goddamn wall, that's the guy that you need to talk to. Damn it. Sorry.
Okay.
I have fat fingers. I apologize. Oh, no. Oh, no, Brian. Don't go anywhere. Buff Nation, I'm back. Hey, I'm back.
There we go.
Fat fingers. Small phone, bad call.
Your
But
alignments, okay.
I'm getting a lot of questions about Coach Wilson potentially being the DC. And look, if I'm Coach Wilson, I'm definitely listening to other offers because other people can pay more than CU, and they always have.
Yeah.
He's
And
been here
always
once.
will.
Always will.
Yeah.
He's been here once. He doesn't really owe anything to the CU faithful. Obviously, I want him to stay, but that's just for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
But if he's given the defensive coordinator position and it's a fast track to him being a head coach, I think he has to take that. So I'm really hoping that's the play here because I really doubt that Carl Durrell doesn't see the coach that he is and the motivator that he is. We had Coach Barnett on 3 weeks ago on McChesney Unchained, and he said in the interview, he goes, I was standing out there one of the few times I got to go watch practice. I'm standing next to Lance Carl, and I'm watching the D-line get after it. And you know that Coach Wilson was Barnett's D-line coach for 5 years. The whole 5 years I was there, Wilson was my D-line coach. And when I left, he went to Oklahoma. And he looked right at Lance, and he goes, these kids have never in their life been coached like this. And I know exactly what he's talking about because it doesn't matter if you do it once, twice, 3 times well. That doesn't mean shit. Can you do it 90 times in a game, every game, consistently, and live up to your potential? And if he's the defensive coordinator moving forward, I think that this defense takes a step from here to here just because they are so damn surly. I mean, there's a reason I'm raised by David McChesney and Chris Wilson. So if you wonder why I'm nuts and kind of a psycho, but in a good way, that's why. So if that's what you want in Boulder again, and you're looking for people to run through folks rather than to them, Coach Wilson should be the DC, period.
Well, you mentioned the timing. I think it's interesting in that, you also mentioned earlier in this podcast that Coach Durrell told you, hey, Mustafa and Lamb and all these guys are coming back, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting that with all these guys coming back for probably their final year, that you wouldn't keep Coach Summers, right? And maybe keep that continuity. But unless you keep Coach Wilson. Because if you're bringing in a totally new guy, which Durrell might do, but if you're bringing in a totally new guy, that seems like a more interesting move. You're going to change possibly the whole defensive terminology when you've got almost everybody back. I think that's an interesting move. But because I do believe this defense got better. The Texas game was bad. Half your defense was sitting in Boulder.
When Nate Landman went out against Utah, the defense nosedived.
Well, and also, Matt, we know in that bowl game, Terrence was not down there. Jalen Sami wasn't down there. Mark Perry wasn't there.
They didn't have half their guys.
Half your DBs were sitting at home. You didn't have half your guys. So
it was good to get on national TV regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
It's also good to get your ass kicked at the end of the year because it makes what you hear during this offseason way, way, way more important from the coach.
Right.
So I think that we just have to take the negative with the positive here and understand that this is a building process. And the process of building with the bus has been interrupted so many damn times. I think that we finally have consistency at the head coaching position where Carl Durrell and Rick George are hand in hand, and Carl's going to be there for a long time as long as he can be consistent. And he made a bowl game every year at UCLA. And I can almost guarantee you, Buff Nation, they are making bowl games every year.
Yeah. So you mentioned you asked Coach Durrell, hey, who you got mine for DC? And he said he has a guy, which means maybe it's not – strength coach, which means maybe it's not you. I don't know. But when Wilson gets let go or says he's not coming – they say he's not coming back, a lot of fans think, well, what about Matt McChesney? That's what he does, right? He trains guys. Would you take that job if you were offered?
If they offered me the defensive line job or an opportunity to interview for the defensive line job, the offensive line job, the strength and conditioning job, playing both ways for 6 years, being tutored by Coach Wilson, everything I've learned up to this point and how highly regarded the business is, I'd have to listen. I'm not going to sit here and lie and blow smoke up your ass like it's not the dream job. The only reason I didn't take the opportunity back in the day, and I know there's a lot of misconception about that, and to be honest with you, it's none of your business, but I'll tell you anyway. It's because of the 1-year contract thing. And that's not around anymore. They can give multiple year contracts now. But back in the day, they could only give 1-year contracts. And I couldn't walk away from the business that I had and the requirements and the responsibility to go jump at that just to put the business in a hole. But 6-0 is rolling. And if I could find somebody to step in there and run that at the same level, and I think I found that guy in Jace Davis, who's an unbelievable NFL guy, played at UNC and has done a really good job. TJ Patterson, who played at CU, went to Boulder High, and he's our quarterback coach, of course.
Yeah.
If they can step in and CU asks, I mean, I'll listen. And look, man, I'm not going to sit here and act like it's not something I would want to do down the road. I look at it like this. I don't think anybody knows Colorado recruiting better than me, including the guys up there. And my love for that place, my intensity, regardless if you like it or not. If you don't like it, you don't like football. And if you do like it, you're a football guy or a football girl, and that's what I am.
Yeah.
Not a football girl, of course, but a football guy. And I think that we could do a lot of special things up there and keep a lot of these Colorado kids that are exiting home.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the most important thing in rebuilding the program and getting it back to where Carl Durrell wants, but if Coach Durrell asked, if Coach Wilson asked, if he takes the DC job and the D-line job opens up, I'm going to listen and I'm going to interview, and you never know what could happen. So I'm not saying I would, I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I'm saying that I bleed black and gold, and it'd be hard to say no.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with that. And I want to transition because you mentioned the business that's now rolling. Let's end with this, Matt, that you do have things rolling at 6-0. We talked at the top that you've got a lot of guys that are coming through your gym. Just tell me real quick, let's wrap up. The 2021 class is pretty much signed. I mean, I think all the top kids in the state are signed. Who are a couple of guys, whether they're in your gym or not, because I know you follow the whole state, whether they come to you or not. Tell me a couple of guys in your mind are the top kids in this class, maybe some guys that might be buffs down the road.
Well, the three that we sent up this year, Chase Penry, Trustin Oliver, and then Mason Maddox, who got a PWO from Coach Wilson. Mason Maddox might be the best lineman in the state, both sides of the ball. And that's not an exaggeration at all. Like, if you find his film on Instagram or Twitter, he is whipping ass. And I would not be surprised if he's your starting center or nose tackle 3 technique in a couple of years after development. Chase and Trustin are special. Chase is a great route runner and makes people look stupid in the secondary. And Trustin is one of the most explosive athletes with the best personality that I've been around in a long time. So all those guys are up there now. Mason leaves in July. Next year's class, Connor Jones is committed to Michigan already. They didn't even offer him. If he's good enough to play at Michigan, he's good enough to play in Boulder. Braden Miller, his brother Bear, is at Stanford. CU pursued him pretty hard, but he ended up going to his dream school. I'm not sure what Braden's going to do. I know he has an offer from CU, but you never know. Caden Weatherby's going to make his decision here pretty quick, and we'll let him announce it. But I'm pretty sure he's locked up and probably leaving the state, and we'll let him announce all that. But looking into next year's class, it's not so much how many kids they keep or who they identify. It's they have got to fine-tooth comb this entire state. Yeah. There's Ryan Moeller came from Rifle. I mean, Nate Salter came from Buena Vista. Joel Klatt was a walk-on baseball player. I mean, for God's sakes, the list goes on and on and on and on of great buffs who have just come out of nowhere to contribute. And I think that there's this like social media and the curse and just virus that it is. For all the good things it does, it amplifies all the negative. And there's this mindset in the state of Colorado, because it is so affluent, that a PWO, a preferred walk-on somewhere, is somehow like not a good opportunity. And there's only like 4 or 5 for in-state guys, where there's 20-some scholarships most of the time. So if they're taking a PWO, they think that kid can develop into a starter.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the best players I played with at CU were walk-ons. Terrence Burrell walked on from the Air Force Academy, and Klatt was a walk-on. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. Just
Ryan
great
Moeller.
buffs that have, exactly. The great buffs that have gone down that road. And they've got to find a way to keep some of the local talent here and then sprinkle in some of these developmental guys. And then they have got to go hard, like you said, after a top quarterback. They have to go get one of these kids that's going to be a draft pick and build their team around them. And if that requires them to say you're the starter from day one, well, shit, he's the starter from day one. Who cares? I mean, it's what it is. If you can go bag an Elite 11, top 5 quarterback in the country who's a projected draft pick in 3 or 4 years, because that's the way this is going.
Yeah.
I talked to the strength and conditioning coach for the Los Angeles Rams last night, and we were talking about prospects and training. And he was talking about the fact that they're looking at like sophomores and freshmen in college already to identify who has the frame to potentially project as a good player. Wow. So it's like this. It brings me full circle to combine training and pro day training and all that stuff, talking about strength and conditioning. This idea that guys are just going to get ready to play in the NFL after their senior year is the most ludicrous shit I've ever heard in my life. What I told Nate Landman at the beginning of this season, at the end of last, was you better start getting ready for the NFL now. Mustafa Johnson better start getting ready for the NFL now. You better start learning the terminology and the scheme and 5 points of pressure on a pass rush and how to play different positions and how to play a 4 technique and a 0 and how big they want you and how small they want you, all that shit now, because the 4 months you get after the season, that's to heal and move forward. If that's what you're relying on to get ready for the NFL, you're not going to fucking make it. And unfortunately, it goes full circle to the high school level too. So many people out here are so concerned about simply getting there. They don't have a plan once they get there. And I'm always saying at 6-0 constantly, every day. You can ask any of my guys who are consistent or their life. The goal is not to get to college. The goal is to go there and leave a legacy so you can walk down on the sideline just like I do and just walk into the building and be like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Blah, 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 blah. That's what it's about. It's not about going there for free school. If you want to go to CU or any place else for free school, get good grades and go for free, you bookworm. Otherwise, you better be able to play.
Yeah. Well, and one last thing, you mentioned guys coming to the state from anywhere. Dalton Reisner, who went to K-State, was from Wiggins. Of all places, from Wiggins High School. So
losing Reisner to K-State, like literally stabbed a knife in my heart.
I know. You and I have talked about that a number of times.
Dan Jones, Arizona State.
Yeah, that was a tough one. A couple of guys that have been through your gym and are now in the NFL. So,
well, I mean, think of Trey Zoon to A&M this year. Aiden Nakia-Keana to Notre Dame, Cole Taylor to LSU, Reese Atterbury to Michigan, Connor Jones to Michigan, Alex Padilla to Iowa. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And it gets to the point where as a coach and as a buff, I look at it like, am I wrong? And then I watch these guys go. And, for example, Drake Nugent and Bear Miller, both going to Stanford in the same class and then both dressing and playing as much as they did this year.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of my guys and I love them, but damn it, those two should be in black and gold.
Well, and both of them on the field in Folsom last year against CU, right?
Exactly. Clayton Adams telling me that Drake Nugent is too short to play center, but he's a 5'10" offensive line coach. I'm sitting there like, oh, you're crazy.
And there
I want my center to have leverage. He's 6'3", 300 pounds. He's not small.
And there was Drake playing for Stanford, which last I checked has been a better program than CU. He's good enough to play at Stanford.
Coach Carberry at Stanford jumped on those two like hotcakes when he found out CU wasn't that interested.
Yeah, well, it's crazy.
And look, I don't mean to dog my university. That's not what I'm trying to do. I love that place. But look, if it takes me calling somebody out to get action, we're calling somebody out to get action.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about feelings. This is football. It ain't friend ball.
Yeah. Well, and I know you've done that a lot, and you and I have talked about it a lot over the years. That's more of a discussion. We're going to get deeper into that probably some other time in the offseason. We touched on a lot of things here today, and Matt, I appreciate it. You and I kind of keep trading being on each other's podcasts every now and then.
Amen.
So, love to be on yours at some point. We'll talk to you again later this offseason, but that'll do it for this edition of the podcast. And thank you, Matt. And we'll talk to Buff fans here later on this offseason.